What if I told you the United States economy wasn't designed by a president, a king, or a seasoned statesman? What if I told you the entire financial system that powers America today was the brainchild of a man who started with nothing? An orphan, born into poverty on a tiny island, a man who, by every measure of his time, was destined for failure. This is the incredible and often overlooked story of Alexander Hamilton. His story begins in 1755 on the small Caribbean island of Nevis. Alexander Hamilton was born out of wedlock, a status that carried a heavy stigma. His childhood was a series of relentless hardships. His father abandoned the family when he was just a boy, and a few years later, his mother died, leaving him an orphan as a teenager. He was left to fend for himself in a world that offered him no safety net and no clear path forward. But Hamilton possessed something far more valuable than wealth or status: a brilliant, restless mind and an unshakable will to succeed. While other boys his age were learning trades or working the land, Hamilton devoured books. He read everything he could get his hands on: philosophy, history, finance. He worked as a clerk for a trading company and quickly demonstrated a genius for commerce and organization that was years beyond his age. He wrote constantly, his prose sharp and persuasive. His raw intelligence and ambition were so obvious, so undeniable, that they caught the attention of local leaders. These men saw a spark in the young orphan that was too bright to be ignored. They pooled their resources and raised enough money to send him to the one place where a man like him might have a chance: the American colonies. When Hamilton arrived in New York City in 1773, he found a land brimming with opportunity, but also simmering with chaos and revolutionary fervor. He enrolled in King's College, now Columbia University, and quickly became a vocal supporter of the Patriot cause. When the American Revolution finally erupted, Hamilton didn't hesitate. He joined the fight, and his strategic mind soon brought him to the attention of the one man who mattered most: General George Washington. Hamilton became Washington's most trusted aide-de-camp. For years, he was at the very center of the war effort, but he wasn't just dodging bullets and writing letters. He was observing, analyzing, and learning, and what he saw from this unique vantage point absolutely terrified him. He saw an army on the brink of collapse, not from British cannons, but from systemic failure. The 13 colonies were anything but united. They had no stable currency. Money printed by one state was often worthless in another. There was no unified system for managing debt, and consequently, no national credit. He watched as soldiers who were risking their lives for freedom went unpaid for months, sometimes years. He saw critical shortages of food, ammunition, and clothing because the states refused to cooperate or contribute their fair share. The Continental Congress was powerless, unable to compel the states to act. While others saw a military problem, Hamilton saw a deeper, more dangerous economic one. He understood a fundamental truth that many of his contemporaries missed. Political independence is meaningless without economic stability. A nation that cannot pay its debts, feed its army, or manage its finances is not a nation at all. It's just a collection of squabbling territories waiting to be conquered or to collapse from within. After the miraculous victory at Yorktown, America was finally independent. But it was also completely broke. The new nation was drowning in a sea of debt from the war. Each state had its own massive pile of IOUs, and the national government had its own. Foreign powers like France, who had financed the revolution, wanted their money back. But how could a country with no real treasury, no unified currency, and no credit possibly pay? Foreign investors saw the United States not as a promising new venture, but as a risky bet doomed to fail. The states continued to act like rivals, not partners. The Union was fragile, and the dream of a new republic was on the verge of turning into a nightmare. This is where Hamilton's genius truly ignited. He proposed a plan so audacious, so radical, that it sent shockwaves through the political establishment. First, he argued that the new federal government must assume all the debts of the individual states. This wasn't about a bailout, it was about consolidation. By taking on the states' debts, the federal government would force the states, and their wealthy creditors, to have a vested interest in the success of the national project. It would bind the nation together with financial ties. Second, he called for the creation of a national bank, modelled on the Bank of England. This central bank would manage the government's finances, issue a stable national currency, and provide loans to spur economic growth. And third, he proposed that the government issue bonds, turning the national debt itself into an investment vehicle. To Hamilton, debt wasn't a sign of weakness. If managed properly, it was a source of power. It was a tool to establish credit, build trust with investors, and fuel a dynamic economy. His opponents were absolutely furious. Thomas Jefferson, his chief rival, saw this plan as a betrayal of the Revolution. He believed Hamilton's system would create a powerful, centralized government that favored northern bankers, speculators, and wealthy elites over the common man and the agrarian farmer. They feared he was building a financial monarchy, a corrupt system that would rob the states of their power and enrich a select few. The debate was fierce, tearing the new nation's leadership apart. But Hamilton, now appointed as the first-ever Secretary of the Treasury under President Washington, was relentless. He argued, debated, and compromised, famously trading the location of the nation's new capital to a southern spot on the Potomac in exchange for votes for his financial plan, and he won. Once his plan was approved, Hamilton went to work with incredible speed and efficiency. He established the United States Treasury Department, which still manages the nation's finances today. He stabilized the new American currency, making it trustworthy at home and abroad. He began paying off the nation's debts, meticulously building a reputation for financial credibility. The results were almost immediate and truly transformative. With a stable financial system in place, trust was restored. Money began to flow into the United States from European investors. Trade boomed. New industries began to sprout. The economic engine that would eventually make America the most powerful nation in the world had been ignited. The financial markets, the banking systems, the very idea of an integrated American economy, all of this grew from the seeds Hamilton planted. Wall Street, as we know it, exists today because of the system he designed. But a man who wields that much power and moves that fast inevitably makes powerful enemies. Hamilton was known for his brilliance, but also for his arrogance. He could be outspoken, dismissive of his critics, and unwilling to suffer fools. His political and personal rivalries were intense, none more so than his long-standing feud with a fellow New York politician, Aaron Burr. Their animosity festered for years, fueled by political ambition and personal insults. In 1804, this bitter rivalry reached a tragic and fatal conclusion. Burr, feeling his honor had been slighted one too many times, challenged Hamilton to a duel. On a cliffside in Weehawken, New Jersey, Alexander Hamilton was shot. He died the next day, at just 49 years old. It was a shocking end for the man who had done so much to build the nation. But Hamilton's ideas did not die with him. The economic architecture he designed proved so durable, so effective, that it has survived for over 2 centuries. Think about the cornerstones of the modern American economy. A massive national debt used to finance government operations, a central banking system in the Federal Reserve, a dynamic market for government bonds and securities, a global reputation for financial stability.